here. Lots of mistakes in the Bible, you said. You said there's a numerical contradiction. How old was Jehoiachin? Was he 8 years old or 18? Well, I think you need to understand a couple things, Dan. Here's the passage, 2 Kings chapter 24. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. His mother's name was some hard name, the daughter of another hard name of Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. How many of you have trouble pronouncing some of them big names? Okay, skip it. Call him George and keep going. Okay. He did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father had done. At that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem. Well, how many times did Nebuchadnezzar come up against Jerusalem? Let's talk about that in a minute. And the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar came against the city and did besiege it. And Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother, and his servants, and his princes, and everybody. And he took him in the 8th year of his reign. But when you read it in 2 Chronicles, Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem. Last one was 3 months. This one's 3 months and 10 days. And Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babylon, and all the goodly vessels. Took all the stuff this time. Okay. Before you get bent out of shape over a supposed contradiction in the Bible, Dan, let me explain a couple things to you. The Bible's method of talking about when kings and queens reign might be a little different than the way we think about things. So let's discover about that and about some ancient history of this region. Joint reigns are quite common in the Bible. The dad is getting too old to be king, so he says, son, you're king. But he keeps counting the rest of his life as part of his reign, so the son is the king and the dad is the king. But they go to the son for wisdom and advice. This happens numerous times in the Bible, or mother-son, same kind of thing. And both they're called overlapping reigns, which is that's the way they think. It's not a problem. Dad's too old to run the job, son's taken over, but dad is still king, and we still call him yes, sir. Okay? Timeline of Jerusalem from Wikipedia. There is a major timeline of major events in the history of Jerusalem, a city that has been fought over 16 times in its history. During its long history, Jerusalem has been destroyed twice, besieged 23 times, and you can read all about it yourself. If you study the history of Babylon, which today is the country of Iraq, and Persia, which today is the country of Iran, they used to be called Babylon and Persia in the Bible, they've got quite a history also. Starting about 600 BC, keep in mind numbers go backwards when you go forward on a timeline before Christ. It counts down from 600 to 0. Well, there was a battle at Carchemish in 606 BC. Babylon, this old area is desert, and so when they're going to come down to attack Egypt, they go right through Israel. And on the way through, hey, might as well steal everything they got. That's been the attitude, you know, got to feed the army and take all their stuff. So poor Israel caught right in the middle between these two superpowers, Egypt down here, the superpower at that time, and Babylon and Iran, Babylon and Persia, always fighting, and they had to go right through Israel. That was because you can't go across that big desert. So the Babylonian Empire was crashing against the Egyptian Empire. And you can study the history of this, and it gets a little confusing, but there's a lot going on. Babylon and Egypt are fighting. They finally met right there at the city of Carchemish in 60. This article said 609. Most say 606. Doesn't matter. The concept is the same. They're fighting with each other, and the Babylonian Empire is expanding or contracting over time, like every empire does. So here's the Babylonian Empire. At one time in history, they included Egypt. They actually conquered Egypt. Other times, Egypt rebelled. Sometimes poor Israel was trying to be friends with Egypt to make them their ally. Other times, tried to be friends with Babylon. Bottom line is, they were stuck in the middle, between the anvil and the hammer. Not a good place to be. 605 BC, location Carchemish, result decisive Babylonian victory and the end of the Egyptian intervention. Finally, the Egyptians said, I think we're going to stay out of that area. We'll just stay here in Africa. So, let's see. The article is about the siege that occurred in 597 BC. It is not to be confused with the second siege by Nebuchadnezzar. Came there twice. The siege of Jerusalem was a military campaign carried out by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, in 597 BC. In 605, he defeated Pharaoh Necho at the Battle of Carchemish and subsequently invaded Judah. According to the Nebuchadnezzar Chronicle, King Jehoiakim of Judah rebelled against the Babylonian rule, but Nebuchadnezzar captured the city and installed another guy to be the king. So they conquered them, put their king in there. He was king for a while, decided we're going to quit paying tribute to those guys, stop paying, and they came over and conquered him again. Explain it to him. So in 605 BC, Daniel was taken captive. He was one of those taken captive in the 605 campaign. In 597, there was another campaign, the siege of Jerusalem. They went because they stopped paying the tax they told him to pay. They came to get him again. Okay? In 606, he defeated Pharaoh Necho and invaded Judah. So the captivity of Judah took place in 586, where we have another 10-year period. 10 years later, they go get him again and take a bunch of people captive. One time they took 10,000 people captive. Another time they took 7,000. They took the smart guys, the ones, the engineers and the people with some brains, left the poor of the land behind. We don't want them. We don't want the welfare cases. Let's take the people who can do us some good. So Dan, there's not a contradiction in the Bible. This is another example of where these two passages you refer to actually shed more light. He was 8 years old when he became king with his mother, and 18 when he became king by himself. Not a contradiction, Dan. There's a 10-year period between the second and third siege. Just study a little history. There's not a contradiction at all, son. You say he was 18 years old. I'm sorry, he was 8 when he became king with his mother, and 18 when he became king by himself. Both times, he didn't get the message Nebuchadnezzar wanted him to get, and he rebelled and had to be clobbered.